No one can save you, and no one wants to.
Hey everybody, I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Joining me today is once again my good friend and fellow VV client, Lake Copeland.
Hey everyone, it's great to be here again after 2 years.
For those who may not remember, Lake previously got to join me while blogging Jurassic World and the Chipmunk Adventure. So, for this episode, let's discuss one of the most timeless classic fairy tales of all time, Snow White. What started out as an early 19th century Grimm Brothers fairy tale soon became Walt Disney's first full-length animated feature film, and to this day, ever since 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a legendary Disney classic. And so far, it's been about 7 years since I blogged this animated masterpiece. Also, over the years, Snow White has been adapted many times. For example, there was Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs from 2020, The Seventh Dwarf from 2015, and Happily Ever After from the 90s, all of which I blogged before. And when it comes to Disney, Snow White has appeared in 2 Disney rides like Snow White's Enchanted Wish and the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. She had a cameo with other Disney characters in The Lion King 1.5, Ralph Breaks the Internet, and Once Upon a Studio. She appeared in video games like Kingdom Hearts and Epic Mickey Power of Illusions, TV shows like The House of Mouse, Sophia the First, ABC's Once Upon a Time, and the Lego Disney Princess special on Disney+. Also to note, some folks believe that Snow White was the inspiration for My Little Pony's Fluttershy. Anyway, over the past couple years, Lake and I have been hearing news of a new Disney live-action remake of Snow White, and we have been pretty curious and interested. The question is, how was our experience after seeing it in theaters last month? Well, we're about to find out. So, ready, Lake?
Ready.
So, released on March 21st, 2025, the movie is Snow White. And just to remind you, viewers, like my countless previous episodes, this blog will be based on our own personal thoughts and experiences. So, I just hope that you guys can hear us out and understand where we're coming from. So, let's get started. The film follows Snow White, a beautiful and sweet princess who was born during a snowstorm. After her mother falls ill and her father fails to return from a campaign against an encroaching threat, the new Queen Grimhilde usurps the throne and forces Snow White to work as a scullery maid. One day, when the Queen's magic mirror declares that Snow White is the fairest maiden in the land, she orders her huntsmen to kill her. Thankfully, Snow White flees into the forest and finds refuge with 7 mining dwarves and a group of bandits led by the handsome thief Jonathan. Together, Snow White and her new friends must strive to survive the evil queen's relentless pursuit and aspire to take back the kingdom. So, what do we think of this movie? Well, in my personal opinion, I didn't think this movie was as bad as most folks say it is. In fact, I find it to be a very magical, emotional, and nostalgic film. Plus, it's 10 times better than that coal black cartoon from the Merry Melody series. What about you, Lake?
Well, for starters, It's not as bad compared to the original, but I thought it was wonderful.
Awesome. And to further explain what we're talking about, let's move on to Mustang Notes. So, on October 31st, Halloween 2016, The Hollywood Reporter reported that Walt Disney Pictures was developing a live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs with Mark Platt, an avid fan of the original film, signed on as lead producer, with Aaron Cressida Wilson being in talks to write the screenplay. Caleb McDougall, in his third producing collaboration with Disney and Platt, served as executive producer. Disney had been considering a live-action Snow White film ever since the early 2000s, and at one point planned on adapting the story as a martial arts film set in China.
A Chinese version of Snow White, huh? I wonder what would have been like if they made it.
Anyway, on May 30th, 2019, it was reported that Mark Webb, the director of the Amazing Spider-Man films, was in talks to direct the film until it was confirmed in September that very same year. In November 2021, Greta Gerwig was reported to be co-writing the screenplay. Wilson ultimately received sole credit for the screenplay, with Gerwig receiving off-screen additional literary material credit alongside Jez Butterworth, Stephen Levinson, Jeff Nathanson, Victoria Strauss, and Chris Weitz. Filming for Snow White was originally set to begin in March 2020 in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Los Angeles, California, but it was sadly delayed in July 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In August 2021, it was announced that filming would take place in the United Kingdom from March to July 2022. Principal photography began on March 7th, 2022, and wrapped up on July 13th, 2022. Unfortunately, there were some problems. For example, on March 15th, 2022, a fire damaged the production set at Pinewood Studios. The stage was under construction when a tree reportedly caught on fire, leading to a huge blaze. A source from Disney confirmed that no filming was underway. Also, Disney was unsatisfied with the film's original cut, and they ordered reshoots, which took place in June 2024. And, of course, the movie was facing delays due to the SAG-AFTRA strike. Man. Anyway, aside from that, the film's visual effects were provided by Moving Picture Company, Frame Store, Day for Night, Passion Pictures, Vitality Visual Effects, Cheap Shot VFX, Lola Visual Effects, and Crafty Apes. Now, from my personal experience, I got to see this movie twice in theaters, and to me, I thought it was handled pretty well. For example, I think the sets for the castle, the forest, and the dwarves' cottage and mines looks really excellent. And I think the village, which was never shown in the animated version, looks great too. What do you think, Lake?
Well, I thought the sets were breathtaking.
Yeah, I guess I can agree with you for that. As for the story, well, like Tim Burton's Dumbo, I like how it takes the 1937 anime classic and expands on it a bit. Also, I like how it features Snow White's childhood backstory, and that we get to see what her biological family was like before they died. Lake, how would you describe the story?
Well, the story is kind of similar, but I love the new ideas they added.
Okay, I like that too. Also, there are some dark and thought-provoking moments, like the dark forest scene, which, in my opinion, is equally as scary compared to the original film. And an owl and a flock of bats made us jump out of our seats.
But, unfortunately, there are no alligator logs.
Yeah, that is pretty disappointing. But still makes you wonder what it'd been like if they did include them. I mean, would that have been too scary for younger children?
I guess so.
Also to note, I feel like this scene explains the most likely reason why Snow White doesn't wear her red bow for a majority of the movie. Plus, we like the several different woodland creatures that hang with Snow White throughout the movie. I mean, sure, we do get some familiar animals like doves, deer, squirrels, chipmunks, bunnies, birds, and a turtle.
But there's also some new ones too, like a woodpecker, a hedgehog, and some mice.
There's also an epic moment where Snow White leads the villagers while confronting the evil Queen Grimhilde nearing the end of the movie. Similar to what Princess Elena and Princess Sophia got to do in Elena and the Secret of Avalor. Plus, like with Cinderella and Mulan, I like that this movie includes a few important values. You see, while Cinderella lived by the values of courage and kindness, and Mulan lived by the values of loyalty, bravery, and truth, Snow White gets to live by the values of fearlessness, fairness, bravery, and truth. The last thing to mention is the costumes, which were designed by costume designer Sandy Powell, who previously did the costumes for Hugo, 2015 Cinderella, and Mary Poppins Returns. And in my opinion, I think Sandy did a really great job bringing these costumes to life. In fact, believe it or not, several weeks ago, me and some friends got to see two of them being displayed at the Cafe Circle restaurant at Disney California Adventure. Lake, what do you think of these costumes?
Well, I thought the costumes are not too bad, and plus, they're almost reminiscent into their original animated counterpart.
I agree. And now, let's talk about the movie's song numbers. While the film does include a few of the original songs written by Frank Churchill and Larry Morey, the new songs for this movie were put together by Justin Paul and Benji Pasek, who in the past helped with songs for La La Land, The Greatest Showman, and 2019's Aladdin. However, for now, we'd like to talk about 5 of these. Our first song is Good Things Grow. Now, while there are 3 versions featured throughout the movie, I think the first version is the best because, according to director Mark Webb, it's described as an invitation to the warm, nostalgic festivals of Snow White's childhood. Also, like the other songs in this film, the choreography by Samantha Jo Moore is excellent. Next is the classic Whistle While You Work, sung by Snow White and her new dwarf friends. Like in the original film, it's the kind of song that folks sing in order to make chores look like fun. But what makes it different is that Snow White uses this song to help the 7 dwarves get along better. The next song to talk about is Princess Problems, sung by Jonathan and Snow White. Now, this song, in my opinion, is just okay. Not bad, just okay. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand that its purpose is to express Snow White and Jonathan's differences in their views on life, but at the same time, it's not that memorable compared to the other songs in the movie. I mean, you understand what I mean, like, don't you?
Yeah, of course I do.
Next we come to the villain song, All Is Fair, sung by the evil Queen Grimhilde. In our opinion, this song is just awesome, and it kind of makes you wonder why Walt Disney did not think of doing something like this back in 1937. I mean, it's very theatrical and show-stopping, and it feels almost reminiscent to villain songs that we know from the Disney Renaissance, like Poor Fortunate Souls, Be Prepared, Hellfire, and a few others like that. Plus, what makes it awesome is that it gets a reprise while Grimhilde transforms into an old hag and conjures up the poison apple. The last song to talk about for now is the Silly Song, performed by the 7 dwarfs and the 7 bandits. In our opinion, while it is short compared to the animated version, we like that it's used as a union song where 2 groups who used to be rivals become friends. Kind of like the Ugglewug song from the Peter Pan stage musical. And now, let's move on to the cast and a couple of their songs. Our main protagonist, Princess Snow White, is played by Rachel Ziegler, whom was in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, DC's Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and Skydance's Spellbound. Now, to us, Rachel does a wonderful and sweet performance as Snow White, and we think her character, despite what she's gone through during her childhood, Snow White is both kind and gentle, but at the same time, she fears her stepmother and her abuse while wanting to restore her kingdom to the state it used to be before her parents' death. Plus, we like that Snow White shows her people fairness, compassion, and her desire to stand up to her evil stepmother, which shows her fearless side.
Also, we kind of find it interesting that Snow White is born after a snowstorm. Kind of like Flurry Heart from My Little Pony.
Another thing we like regarding Snow White was when she and her family bakes and shares apple pies with the villagers, and where she gave a floral crown to a young girl. We also like her speech, where she reminds the guards of who they used to be, kind of like what Jasmine did in 2019's Aladdin. Plus, the idea of Snow White wearing a locket kind of makes her similar to Odette from the Swan Princess. Also, we think her Waiting on a Wish song is a truly lovely song, and we like its message of Snow White's desire to do what's right for her kingdom and become the person that she's meant to be. Next is Jonathan, played by Andrew Burnap, who began his professional stage career in the Public Theater's revivals of King Lear in 2014 and Troilus and Cressida in 2016. Now, Jonathan is a commoner and the leader of a group of bandits who struggles to feed himself and his friends, and he wants to defy Queen Grimhilde's monarchy. To us, Jonathan has a lot more character development compared to Prince Florian from the animated version, and he's shown to have good agility as he can easily fight the Queen's guards when he and Snow White are in the forest. Plus, he seems like the kind of character you get if you put Eugene Fitzherbert, Aladdin, and Robin Hood into a blender. Also to note, I think he and Snow White make a beautiful couple together, especially during their romance song, A Hand Meets a Hand. Next we come to the 7 dwarves. Jeremy Swift as Doc, George Salazar as Happy, Jason Kravitz as Sneezy, Andrew Barth Feldman as Dopey, Martin Kleba as Grumpy, Titus Burgess as Bashful, and Andy Grodelishun as Sleepy.
To us, they use motion capture and puppetry. They're not that bad. Yes, I can understand where your folks are coming from, but they're still charming characters.
Plus, while most of them are similar to how they were back in 1937, we think the ones who stick out the most are Doc, Grumpy, and Dopey. Let me explain. You see, Doc is very intelligent, and he seems to be a medical expert, like when he helps Jonathan after he was shot by an arrow. Also, there's the fact that he doesn't seem to trip over his words like in the animated film. Grumpy may seem like a grouchy jerk at times, but it's revealed here that he's misunderstood, which kind of makes him very sympathetic. As for Dopey, well, he's still my favorite dwarf, and he has a good reason for for not talking due to him being ashamed. Kind of similar to Sir Bartleby from Sophia the First. Plus, we really didn't mind that Dopey gets to talk here compared to his animated counterpart, and we like that he narrates the story. Also to note, we think this movie's version of Hi-Ho is still as classical as it was back in 1937, and the new lyrics are really, really clever. Also, it gets a whistling reprise. Next up is the Huntsman, played by Anzu Kabia, whom was in Murder on the Orient Express, Last Christmas, and the Fast and Furious movie Hobbs and Shaw. Like in the animated film, the Huntsman is assigned by Queen Grimhilde to kill Snow White and put her heart in a box. But thankfully, he spares her life and tells her to flee into the woods. Now, despite his title, the Huntsman is a very kind man who cares for Snow White, and he doesn't like harming others and would rather take the blame for failing his tasks rather than hurting others.
However, like in the original, where he gave the queen the heart of a pig, in here, it was an apple instead.
And as punishment, he gets locked up in the dungeon. However, later in the film, after Jonathan gets locked up with him, the Huntsman, whom was moved by his goal to never give up on Snow White, helps him escape by pulling at the chains with all their strength. Next we come to the Spirit of the Magic Mirror, voiced by Patrick Page, whom was in the Apple TV Christmas movie Spirited. Like in the original film, the mirror is an imprisoned spirit resembling a theatrical mask, surrounded by smoke and fire, who always speaks the truth, normally in verse form. Queen Grimhilde holds ownership over him and primarily exploits its power to ensure that she remains the fairest of all. Also, in this version, the mirror serves as a key plot point to Queen Grimhilde's fate at the film's ending, which we'll talk about in a minute. Finally, we come to the villain of the story, Queen Grimhilde, played by Gal Gadot, best known as Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman from the DC universe, and Shank from Ralph Breaks the Internet. Like in the animated film, Grimhilde is a powerful and mysterious sorceress who is obsessed with being the fairest in the land. Plus, she's very seductive and manipulative, like when she took advantage of the good king's grief and, not long after their wedding, orchestrated his death by sending him off to war. And she's very selfish and authoritative while taking control of the kingdom. Also, we find it interesting that after she finds out that Snow White is still alive, she sends her guards to find her in the forest, and instead of a raven, she has a pet vulture.
Also to note, like in the original, where she falls off a cliff thanks to that lightning strike and the boulder falling down, in here, after shattering the magic mirror, her whole body turns to glass and gets sucked into the magic mirror. Now to us, this death is good, but at the same time, I kind of felt we've seen this death before.
You know, like, I think I'm sort of seeing your point. I mean, we have seen this happen with other villains like Jafar, the Horned King, and King Magnifico. Also to note, it also feels like a taste of her own medicine after what she did to Terra and Aqua in the Kingdom Hearts games. Anyway, on to our final words. Overall, Disney's 2025 live-action version of Snow White is a pretty good film. Sure, I understand that not many people personally like it, but from my perspective, it has a magical story with nostalgic, epic, charming, fun, and thrilling moments, beautiful visuals, memorable characters, and amazing songs, old and new, even though Princess Problems wasn't very memorable in my opinion. Also, I think this is a film that all families, whether you have kids or not, may enjoy.
While some remakes can be good and well done, while several don't hold a candle to the original. But there's great characters, and the actors do a really good job. If you folks are Disney fans, or if you're a big fan of the Grimm Fairy Tale, I'm sure you should give this movie a chance. And plus, it may get a cult following in the future.
So together, we give this film a 95% out of 100. And I know we'll be first in line when it's released to Blu-ray this summer, we hope. Well, that's all for now. I'd like to thank Lake Copeland for joining me today.
You're welcome, Joshua. I hope we could do another collaboration in the future.
That'd be great. As for the rest of you at home, be sure to join me for my next blog. Mustang Power.